and your life becomes a chronic hoop-jumping circus. But in this circus, there is never a reward at the end of the trick. You will not get them to notice you unless they really do need something from you, and that can really add insult to injury. Because not only do they then pay attention for you just long enough to get what they need, then they go right back to ignoring you. Let's talk about this type you may not even know about, called the neglectful narcissist. Now, this is one that I even debated, but it's a rather specific kind of subtype. But it's one that has come up to my attention enough, especially in the context of families and long-term relationships. Now, traditionally, many of you know, narcissistic individuals can very much be in your face, often needing validation, having really poor boundaries, relying on you for narcissistic supply, take, loud, loud, loud. But what about when they are completely detached? So much so that when you talk to them, they barely respond, they have little to no interest in you, and if you are in any kind of relationship with them, you may very well feel as though you have literally ceased to exist. You wouldn't even be surprised if they looked surprised to see you in the room they were in, because they stopped noticing you a long time ago. Now, neglectful narcissism has all the usual top notes of narcissism, but the patterns may play out a little differently here. The lack of empathy will show itself by their utter lack of regard for you. It's as though they have no interest in you whatsoever, whether you are doing well or doing badly. If you are doing well, they will barely take notice of your doing well, and if you are not doing well, they will barely take notice of that either. The entitlement still happens and can be witnessed by you in their life in a variety of different ways. But when it comes to you, it may be the case that they actually really do feel entitled to completely ignoring you. And interestingly, they may not be doing this with everybody. And that's what often makes this hurt more. But there very much can feel like a take you for granted kind of dynamic that plays out in this particular relationship for any number of reasons. They may be bored with you. They may be contemptuous of you for, again, any number of reasons. They may be distracted by work and by other activities and do not feel that they need to make space for you as a person in their life. And they may also feel like there's some other activity like work that's more important. The grandiosity piece may or may not be present with a neglectful narcissist. The arrogance piece is captured in the superiority of believing it is okay to simply ignore the personhood of another human being. But you may be wondering about other stuff like validation seeking or superficiality, the stuff the narcissistic personality is about no matter what. And this is still likely a feature, the validation seeking of the neglectful narcissist, but it may be manifested in other arenas of their lives, like work or other relationships that happen outside of you. So they may be seeing that validation seeking, but they're so tuned out of you, you don't even experience that. Now, this particular type of narcissism is something that most often surfaces in the intimate relationship space, and is definitely manifested as what we talked about in another video as intimacy avoidance. They literally starve their partner of anything resembling closeness or care or awareness. You start to feel like a ghost in your own home. There's also a bit of a superiority element. In essence, it's as though they're saying, like, I'm above paying any attention to you. People who have been in relationships with neglectful narcissists will often describe it as sort of slowly dying on the vine, as being a plant that withers away simply because it isn't watered. Now, sometimes people in relationships with neglectful narcissists think that maybe this narcissism descriptor label doesn't really fit. The fact is, though, they may be enduring the usual lack of empathy and invalidation and general sort of meanness, but not those sort of poor boundaries and in-your-faceness that often characterizes narcissistic relationships. For example, you may not see things, certain other patterns, like the baiting. Your courtship, maybe there was a little excitement in the beginning, and it might also be a little bit weak and anemic. And perhaps in the beginning, there might have been a little bit more interest and engagement in the relationship, but the devaluation and discard phases may not be as insulty and gaslighty, but may look more like a person just sort of disappearing. And a real vulnerability here is that people who may not believe that they deserve more attention or more of a person's regard can actually rather easily fall in with neglectful narcissists. Now, if we were to pull some vocabulary from other areas of the work on personality disorders, neglectful narcissists may actually feel like what we sometimes call schizoid. The schizoid personality style is one that is genuinely not interested in any human relationships at all. They are isolated and they do not seek validation, attention of any kind, or human contact with anyone. There is a difference between this schizoid pattern and the neglectful narcissist, because the neglectful narcissist may not be interested in any contact with selected people, including you, but may have a relatively robust or engaged social life outside of the relationship they have with you. For example, with colleagues or with old friends. In fact, a neglectful narcissist may even cheat on you, giving whatever intimate energy you never knew they had, but they'll give that intimate energy to the new lover. But they keep you around because it is convenient, because it'll make them look better in public, for reasons of finances, or just for the convenience of having you around, even though they're completely neglecting you. So they like having you around, but they don't feel like they need to attend to you. Now, one might ask, how would a neglectful narcissist be attractive to anyone? It is always apparent with some of the other narcissistic types, particularly like the grandiose narcissist and the malignant narcissist. But you can see some of that here too, interestingly. The neglectful narcissist may, in fact, still have a little bit of that charm and charisma and confidence, especially in the early days of the relationship, but they also may get bored, disinterested, or distracted more quickly. The neglectful narcissist may actually have a few other side issues going on that can also sort of foster this neglectful style. But in some cases, it may not be the contemptuous attention deficit they have. And there will be an entire video on this. But narcissists have a lot of difficulty paying attention to anything other than what is interesting to them at a given time, not taking anyone else's feelings into account. And for a neglectful narcissist, that thing they're interested in is typically not you. So as a result, they are neglectful partners, neglectful parents, neglectful friends, because they are paying attention to whatever they want to pay attention to. The other pathway to consider with the neglectful narcissist is that they have what can sometimes be, I'm just making this up, this term, but we can consider it as an obsessive compulsive overlay. And by that, I do not mean that they are compulsively checking things like doorknobs and locks. I mean this in the overly, rigidly organized, miserly, financially petty, workaholic, everything needs to be just so way. Many people will say that their neglectful narcissist is very attentive at work and connected to people at work, but disconnected from them as partners and family members. But either way, different things may attract people to neglectful narcissists. Obviously, yeah, there's the usual narcissistic charm, blah, 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 charisma, we know all that. But there's also the possibility that given their obsessive focus on something, like work, they may actually be quite compelling, quite successful, and as a result, that might become the reason, maybe you were even initially attracted to them, but also the reason you may make excuses for them. He's always been such a great provider. She's really devoted to her causes. He works 90 hours a week. And then you miss the boat on the fact that human relationships need care and feeding as well. The neglectful narcissist will have the same origins as the other forms of narcissism, such as parental underinvolvement, neglect, or even abuse. It is likely that their backstories are more riddled with sort of underinvolvement from a parent or an overfocus by the parents on a work ethic, working hard, working all the time. Neglectful narcissists may be more likely to come from more emotionally impoverished families of origin and who may have only had the inconsistent presence of their parents. And when the few times their parents were present, they were also probably very inattentive, and it was very likely that those parents gave the best of themselves to other pursuits such as work, church, their own friends, pretty much anyone but their children. Now, as noted above, there may also be other pathways of inattentiveness to issues or to people who are not convenient or seemingly relevant to them, even if it is hurtful to the other person, as well as the kinds of sort of workaholicism and the obsessive and rigid focus on work and money. For them, it may be less about traditional validation seeking per se, less about the look at me in my fancy new car, but rather the validation that comes from being the best worker, the most productive worker, the hardest worker, the most devoted campaign worker, or church volunteer, or whatever. So the neglectful narcissist is clearly different from the other types of narcissism that we have already discussed because there may not be as argumentative or as engaged with you in any meaningful way. So neglectful narcissism may very much lack the scary kinds of rage that we see in other forms of narcissism. In fact, some people who are in relationships with neglectful narcissists may even find a show of emotion, any show of emotion, including rage, to almost be a little refreshing because it means that at least they're alive and they're noticing something, because in general, they're almost nowhere to be found. They also don't have the bad boundaries we often see in other forms of narcissism because they don't tend to get close enough to you to violate your boundaries. If anything, the boundary issue here is that they are so far away, you do not even know where they are. The neglectful narcissist may more often seem sort of closest to the covert narcissist, given that they are more absent. And in fact, some of the covert narcissism, the incapacity for intimacy, the contempt for closeness, those things could explain part of this. But it is not necessarily the case that the neglectful narcissist behaves like a victim. They may, but they may not. Unlike the covert narcissist, they're always going to behave like a victim. This really is sort of its own kind of narcissistic phenomenon. And in fact, many people enduring neglectful narcissistic relationships will report that they often feel that the content and the writing about narcissism does not fully capture their experience of sort of almost dying from not being noticed kind of thing. If this is your partner, you know what this is. It's sort of like being in a relationship with a ghost who you can never reach, who will never listen to you, and who has no regard for you whatsoever. If anything, when they do interact with you, it tends to be critical, or it tends to happen with the dismissiveness you may have with someone who has been sort of hired to do a job and nothing more. You may literally feel like a robot who has been assigned to take care of the things in this relationship. And in a way, it's sort of a convenience that gets things done. But the neglectful narcissist likes the fact that you might get things done, but they have no interest in you, not in your life, not in your well-being, not in your world, and not in your interests. In a way, at best, it's a world full of breadcrumbs. You may stick it out because you think it will change. The deadline will pass, the bills will get paid, the work will ease up, he or she will retire. No, they're just going to keep neglecting no matter what happens in their life. And it is a deeply lonely relationship. And while people who have their narcissists always screaming at them may say that, oh my goodness, it must be nice to have the silence because it sure would be nice to not have someone screaming at me, it can be more lonely to be alone while someone is around than actually to literally be alone. If this was your parent, then this may be one of the more impactful forms of narcissistic parenting, believe it or not. A child needs to be seen. A child has to be seen. And if your parent is living his or her life with very little notice of you, it's going to hurt. It can result in anxious or avoidant attachment styles, a difficulty cultivating connection with other people, with trusting yourself, with trusting other people, or with feeling safe in the world. And it can also place you at risk for narcissism yourself, or for anxiety and for self-doubt as an adult. Children who grow up like this may find themselves becoming sort of hoop jumpers, always trying to excel and succeed or do the things a parent wants, or basically to do anything to try to get their parents' notice. But nothing works with the neglectful narcissistic parent. This is different than the grandiose narcissistic parent who may get supply from the narcissistic child's achievements. These parents may barely notice. These neglectful narcissistic parents, in contrast, may barely notice if their child painted their hair purple. Now, the other way a child may try to get noticed with a neglectful narcissistic parent is also the opposite way, to rebel and to misbehave, anything to garner their attention. This strategy may work because now the child, by being a rebel, may become a bit of an inconvenience if they're getting in trouble, but more often than not, the neglectful narcissist may try to make it the other parent's problem and ask them, the other parent, to discipline you and get you out of the way. Or the neglectful narcissistic parent might either completely jump ship or just momentarily step away so they don't have to deal with you. But this trying to always seek attention, to get your parent to notice you, can really dog you into adulthood. And even in your adult relationships, you may find yourself hoop jumping in your relationships to be noticed. You may engage in attention-seeking behavior, and you may be vulnerable to choosing narcissistic relationships where all this hoop jumping and attention seeking just to get them to notice you and to feel like you are enough is a key element of all narcissistic relationships. It's a painful way to grow up. to be seeking out mirrors and emotional reassurance, and to feel at best like you are an inconvenience, a nuisance, or something to be dealt with later when the important stuff is done. And I want to be clear here. Just because a parent works hard or works a lot doesn't mean that they're a neglectful parent. I have obviously seen many very hardworking parents still find a way to connect with their children whenever it is possible and to be deeply present with them when they are around, even if they're very busy with a backbreaking work schedule. And I got to tell you, I've also seen parents who don't have a lot going on and are always around their children, but still manage to not notice them and basically neglect them. This is not about time served. This is about time present. And having a neglectful narcissist as a parent leaves an empty space that you may be at risk of trying to fill throughout your adult life. So I hope a fuller picture of neglectful narcissism is coming here, which is really, it's this sense of they really can't be bothered. There's other things more important than that to them than you, whether as a child, whether as their partner. Obviously, as a partner, they were able to pay just enough notice to you to draw you in, but then you may wonder, I don't know what I need to do, run cartwheels through the living room, whatever it takes. I can promise you this, the nature of the neglectful narcissist is that they will not notice you. Stay tuned for part 3, because that's when we're going to sort of break down not only how this affects you, but how you can cope with this. Let's take on a little bit more of neglectful narcissism. Now, these relationships take a tremendous toll on us, whether they are our partners or parents or other family members. In some ways, their neglect is really kind of a form of gaslighting, because there is this assumption, sort of like, hey, I'm in a relationship with someone, and that involves paying some attention to them, right? And when they literally look through you, or do not acknowledge you or any way, or don't listen to a word you say, it's a denial of your reality as though you do not exist. So in that way, I guess we could say, a neglectful narcissistic relationship can just be one big gaslight. As a result, these relationships can have numerous negative impacts on a person, including confusion, sadness, feeling like you're not enough, feeling a chronic sense of emptiness, and feeling a sense of longing, constantly trying to do more and more things to try to gain the notice of the neglectful narcissist, and your life becomes a chronic hoop-jumping circus. But in this circus, there is never a reward at the end of the trick. You will not get them to notice you unless they really do need something from you, and that can really add insult to injury. Because not only do they then pay attention for you just long enough to get what they need, then they go right back to ignoring you, which brings into even more stark focus that you are nothing more than a convenience to them, that they call forth only when they need something. They kind of feel like a vending machine. So neglectful narcissistic relationships are really the ones that are most lacking in the key ingredients of all healthy relationships, namely 2 important issues: reciprocity and mutuality. Reciprocity is the back and forth of a relationship where, without thinking, you're there for the other person, you listen to them, they listen to you, you do things for each other, you make compromises, and you ideally don't even really think about it. It's a natural tendency to be able to do this for people who are able to do this, to be those who have empathy and compassion, and these are the people who value relationships. Mutuality is about all the things shared in a relationship: shared goals, shared tasks, shared vision, or simply having each other's back. Again, something you're never going to get in a relationship with a neglectful narcissist. And these are essential ingredients of any healthy relationship. A partner, a family, a parent, a friend, you name it. Now, as noted in previous videos, narcissism reflects an issue with attachment. Most narcissists do tend to have a more anxious attachment style, but some may have what we call avoidant attachments, and many have a mix between the two. The neglectful narcissist definitely leans towards the avoidant attachment style. They just have very little interest in other people, and when there is interest, it may be for a passing moment, just when they need something. This style and pattern can emanate from someone who may themselves have come from a neglectful home themselves, in which there may have been unavailable early caregivers, unemotional homes, or homes that were characterized by trauma, abuse, or other chaos, which just resulted in caregivers just not being available or caregivers being unsafe. This pattern may also be observed in people who come from emotionally cold families and environments. The dismissiveness of their early lives is often something that they carry into adulthood. But surprisingly, believe it or not, for how empty these relationships can be, they can actually be difficult to walk away from. You would think that such a negating, unavailable person would be very easy to leave. They weren't even paying attention to. They may not even notice you leaving. But that part of you, and it really may be a legacy perhaps of your own narcissistic family of origin, may be wired to just keep trying and trying and trying to win them over. In fact, their neglect in an unhealthy way is the hook that keeps the relationship strangely engaging. You may keep trying and trying to get their attention, and in a way, it's as though these relationships always give you something to do. You're always trying to win them over, always trying to look good, cartwheel through the living room, get a big enough gift to just get them interested and to pay attention, plan elaborate parties, whatever. It's a full-time job to get, not even win them over, to get them to notice you, and because of that, it can slowly become your identity. Your job is trying to get them to notice you. Walking away from an identity is not easy. And in that way, these neglectful narcissists play upon that slot machine paradigm that I have talked about before. You keep playing the machine and wasting your money because you think that this time, this pull, this is when it's going to hit. And in that way, you keep putting effort into the neglectful narcissist because maybe after all this time, maybe it will hit. And just like with that slot machine, it's probably not going to. People also get stuck in the familiarity of it all. And as with all narcissistic relationships, many people choose the devil they know rather than the angel they may not have met yet. Leaving one of these relationships will always be difficult until you do the work of you and recognize your worth. No one's going to do that work for you. That you deserve to be seen and heard. And if you can experience that internal shift, then you can at least no longer face the pain of the neglect and perhaps recognize the pragmatic reasons you may stay in a relationship like this because you have children or because it gives you security or safety or money. But if you do stay, it becomes important to recognize they will never see you or notice you. So at a minimum, you may then try to cultivate spaces in your life where that can happen, whether that is in friendships or professional endeavors or other healthy family relationships. And once you realize that you do deserve to be seen, you may just finally cut bait and leave, because that ain't going to happen in this relationship. Now, managing them and managing these relationships is largely a function of good old radical acceptance. They are never going to really notice you and will only do so when it is convenient for them. When you start from that premise, it can make it a bit easier to cope with all of this because you may be less likely to personalize it, and it is essential that you do not personalize it. This is them. This is what they do. They neglect. And when you see it against the larger narcissistic framework of their lack of empathy and their entitlement, you can see that they really do believe that they do not need to notice anyone if they feel they can't be bothered. Don't personalize it. And work to cultivate other spaces in your life where you are seen. Because waiting for them to notice you is like waiting for a bus that is never going to come. The pattern of neglectful narcissism is often missed by people in these relationships, and even by mental health practitioners. We often think of narcissists as brash, in-your-face, demanding, rageful, or even needy. These neglectful narcissists are the ones where, even as you're dying on the vine, that you are the garden which dies because nobody waters it. It is a slow and invalidating process. Many times, people with neglectful narcissistic partners don't feel like the various blogs and books and videos on narcissism even come close to capturing their process. But this pattern is real. The neglectful narcissist can often seem as though they are too superior to be bothered with all the niceties and the things we have to do in human relationships. And that is where their arrogance comes out the most. And they will be the ones sort of snobbily sitting in the corner and seeming judgment of the rest of us and our messy and our joyous worlds of actually caring about each other. Don't let their neglect of you foster your neglect of yourself. Recognize this pattern for what it is. You are not lacking anything. It is they who just lack the capacity for a variety of reasons to fully engage in this thing called life and love. I do hope that this series has illuminated neglectful narcissism for you. I know it's a term some of you may not have heard. I'm sure upon listening to it, some of you thought, oh, this is interesting. I might be in a relationship that's a bit covert, but also more neglectful than not. So I'm hoping by shedding light on this, you now understand that, yeah, this thing you were enduring was real. And even though it didn't have the bells and whistles of a traditional narcissistic relationship, the kinds of fallout for you are as real as they are for the other forms of narcissism. Thanks again for tuning in. Please hit that subscribe button, hit the bell, join us on this channel, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Forward to seeing you soon. Forward to seeing you soon. Forward to seeing you soon.